What is going on, everyone? This is Zach from Clutch Crew Sports, back with another 2022 college football season preview episode. And we're starting off with the ACC. So we've already talked about the Pac 12, the American. We're heading over to the ACC now. And we're going to start with the ACC Atlantic, which has Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, Louisville, Florida State, Syracuse, and Boston College. So those are the 7 teams in this conference. Surprisingly, there's been no realignment with the ACC. Pretty much every other major conference has seen teams leave or go. The ACC, these 14 teams have remained the same. They haven't added anybody yet. Nobody's left. So the ACC is, currently the same as it has been for the past, decade or so. So with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get started with the rankings. So at number 7, I've got Syracuse finishing last place in the ACC Atlantic. They were just 2-6 last year, 5-6 or 2-6 in the conference, 5-7 overall. And their schedule this year, it's pretty tough. You got Purdue at home. You've got UConn, which should be winnable for them outside of their conference. But the ACC Atlantic is strong this year, in my opinion. They got to go at Clemson. They got to go at Pitt from the Coastal, at Wake Forest. I just don't see a lot of wins for Syracuse. I see them finishing with a similar record as they did last year, maybe 2 wins in the conference. They always can upset somebody, but to me, their big game of the year is just going to be at Boston College, their rivalry game. It's a winnable game for them. I don't think too highly of Boston College. And when you're looking at a team like Syracuse, unless, if Clemson was home, I could say, okay, maybe they could somehow upset Clemson like they've done before. But on the road, that just makes it not a good chance. So at Boston College at the end of the year is going to be their key game. Now, I've decided to change some of the information I talk about. Instead of bringing up recruit rankings, I'm going to give up a new sort of metric, which is experience rank. It's a complicated formula that, details players that are coming back and how good the players were that are coming back. So I've decided to do it in a similar manner, just ranking it out of these 7 teams. Syracuse ranks second, as far as bringing back talent and players. Now, it doesn't mean they have the second best team, obviously. I'm saying they're finishing 7th. But, out of the players that are on their team, they've got the second most experience, which is a plus, I think, especially for these bottom teams that have experience. Their program status, I think their passing game should be stronger this year. Last year, that was a bit of a problem. But there's they brought in a new offensive coordinator from, I think, Virginia. So that should make, they're going to add the passing element more to their game. They've basically been a run-first team, and that's still the strength of their offense. Sean Tucker is one of the best running backs in college football last year, over 1,500 rushing yards, on a bad Syracuse team last year. I think he's going to have another good season. And if he does, it could lead to some upsets if they play sort of a control style game, running the ball and not giving the other team that many possessions. But sadly for Syracuse, it's been 3 straight years under 500. They had a surprise season a few years ago when they, made it to a good bowl game and contended in the ACC. But other than that, it's just been a lot of losing seasons for them. Now at 6th in the conference or in the division, I've got Boston College. Similar story to Syracuse. I just don't see many wins for them in the conference. They got to go at Florida State, at Wake Forest. Some of the tougher teams they get at home, like Clemson and Louisville, Clemson and Louisville. But and Duke's a winnable game for them from the Coastal. But Ultimately, I've got them finishing 6th. Their key game, along with Syracuse, that end-of-year rivalry game that BC won last year. And BC was 2-6 in the conference, 6-6 overall. So they did a little bit better than Syracuse overall, but still not a good season. They tied for last place in the conference. Boston College ranks 7th out of these 7 teams with experience rank, so that's not good. I still do give them the edge over Syracuse, but experience-wise, and I will say they're not bad compared to the rest of college football, actually, bringing back starters and stuff, but just out of these 7 teams, they're bad. They could surprise this year. That's another thing I've noticed looking at this team and their schedule. They could have a surprise. Now, I'm not saying win 10 games, but, maybe win 8 games or something like that. It's a possibility. They had some close games last year. However, the downside, I think, is their offensive line has always been with their staple. Boston College offensive line produces a lot of NFL players. It's sort of the strength of their team. It's what they're known for. But they did lose 4 of their 5 starters last year. I see their offensive line getting weaker. At the very least, it's a questionable. We just don't know how their offensive line is going to be. I think that could cause some problems. Phil Eurovic, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but Phil, he's their key player, their QB from last season. He's returning. He was injured a lot of last season, and Boston College played well in the games that he was in. Their whole offense just really took a major hit in those games that he was injured last year. And he is NFL caliber, so it's not a scrub player here. Scouts will be watching this guy. I'm not saying he's going to be the first pick in the draft, but there's definitely potential with this quarterback. And I think it's just, you'll see most of these teams, their key players as quarterbacks, because that's obviously, the most important position and how you win and lose in college. At 5th now in the Atlantic, I've got Florida State. They were 4-4 last year in the conference, 5-7 record. So missed out on a bowl game, but their schedule, they've got a possible big matchup against LSU early in the season, neutral site game. Both teams kind of not what they used to be. Both are former national champions in the last 10 years or so, and have fallen on hard times. Probably more so Florida State, but that should be a fun one to watch. But as always, they play Miami. Out of the Coastal, that's their big rivalry game at Miami. They play this time. Last year, they upset Miami. That was a big win for them. We'll see if they can do it again on the road. That, to me, is going to be their key game, obviously. And then Florida at the end of the year. They came close last year, but, they'd always love to win that game. This team was 4th out of these 7 teams in the experience rank, so right around the middle of the pack with the players they're bringing in, new players versus experienced. This is, in college football, one of the most improved teams from a year ago, and things were looking really rough after that Jacksonville State loss that they had, that embarrassing loss. They started the season terrible. Mike Norvell, could have been fired. That win against Miami sort of saved the season a little bit for him. They didn't have a good season last year, but that at least brought them, brought some momentum for the program. They won some more games, didn't reach a bowl, but this is still, in my opinion, compared to last year, one of the teams that should see one of the biggest jumps. Maybe not so much in their record, but just how they play overall, because they did so good at the end of last season. Jordan Travis is their key player. They sort of had rotating quarterbacks last year. They didn't have just one guy stick it all the way. And there were injuries involved. Travis got hurt a little bit, but he's a dual threat quarterback, very dangerous in the run game as well as passing. So that's sort of going to be their key player on offense to watch. How well Jordan Travis does could, be very key for how they finish. Maybe if they, finish higher in the standings, it's because of Jordan Travis. So at fourth now, I've got Louisville here, and they were 4-4 last year in the conference, 6-7 overall. I've got their key game at the end of the year being NC State, a rival in the ACC Atlantic. I think similar type of teams. It was tough to sort of rank a lot of these teams here. Now we're getting to another, group of teams where it's really hard to predict how they're going to do compared to each other. So I've got that as our key game. Interestingly enough, they play Central Florida and South Florida this year, and Florida State. So they have 3 Florida games, in September there, and we'll see how they do. They start off the year at Syracuse. That should be a win for them. They play Boston College. That should be a win. Virginia, winnable. Then it gets tougher at the end of the season. And as always, their rivalry game against Kentucky, it would be a huge game for them to win. Kentucky's, beat them pretty solidly last year. All right, so with Louisville, they were third out of these 7 teams with experience ranking. So pretty good. Definitely a team that, compared to the rest of the college football landscape, very, very good, bringing back players. And you can't talk about Louisville without bringing up Malik Cunningham, their quarterback. Also a very good running quarterback. Sort of a tradition, it seems like, at Louisville with Lamar Jackson passing the torch off to Malik Cunningham here. Something to know, this guy's improved every season he's played in college football, which gives me confidence to rank Louisville fourth. I thought about potentially going out on a limb and putting Florida State above them, but the fact that Cunningham's gotten better every year, is why I have a lot more faith in Louisville. Another thing, that this team was just unlucky last year. They lost a lot of close games, 3-point loss, 1-point loss. And had those gone the other way, they would have finished a lot higher in the standings than they did. But they're bringing back a very high-scoring offense. It's the defense that's the problem, giving up, almost 40 points a game, some for stretches on average. So the defense should be better. It's not going to be good, but it should be better. And if the offense is like it was before, I think this team could be pretty good, in all honesty. Now at third, I've got NC State, who was also third last year in the conference, 6-2, ranking in the conference, 9-3 overall. So NC State, a very good team from last year. I'm predicting them to have similar success. Their key game is going to be at Clemson. Beating Clemson would be huge for NC State. On the road is going to be tough, but that's going to be a key game, obviously. And then down at the end of the year, the rivalry game against North Carolina. Of course, a big game. Not a too difficult out-of-conference schedule here. Charleston Southern, Texas Tech, UConn. Not too difficult. They did not schedule anybody good, in my opinion, out of conference. So, and East Carolina too. So they could I could see them easily starting 4-0, and then that Clemson game being huge as they play all the ACC teams starting with Clemson. Out of these 7 teams, they're first out of the 7, bringing back players experience-wise. So that's obviously a huge plus for them. They were so close last year to winning the ACC Atlantic. Just came down to them and Wake Forest. Wake Forest won in a nail-biter of a game. So, this team was really good last year. They were a contending team in the conference. Just they couldn't quite do it. Their defense is pretty good. Drake Thomas, one of their captain linebackers, he sort of leads this linebacking position group that's one of the best in college football. I think that's something, if you watch NC State games, you're going to want to pay attention to, how these linebackers play together. Drake Thomas, very good. A lot of tackles last year. Just important that they're bringing it back. Like, they're the most experienced team in this division, so I think that speaks a lot. I'm bullish on NC State. I wanted to rank them higher, but ultimately, because of some factors, I put them third instead of higher. And at second now, I've got Wake Forest, who won this division last year. They were 7-1, 11-3 overall. Their one loss last year, I think, was to Clemson, and that's again who I've got as their key game. They get them at home early in the year, could be a very very huge game, similar to NC State, three easy games to start the year, and then things get tougher. You got Clemson, then at Florida State, and then down at the end of the year it gets a little tougher too, in October, November. But Wake Forest, in my opinion, very, very good team. They're 5th out of 7 in the experience rankings from last year, so a little bit down compared to NC State, obviously, but still, it's not like they lost everybody. Sam Hartman, their quarterback, is ultimately the reason why I took them to finish above NC State. I just trust him a little bit more, and he was one of the best all-time seasons last year in the ACC. I believe he was just one touchdown short of Lamar Jackson's touchdown record in the ACC conference, rushing and passing combined. So he's coming back. I think things didn't end. Obviously, they won their bowl game, but didn't win the conference. They lost to Pittsburgh. I think that's a motivating factor for this team. They want to keep the success up as a program. They were pretty pitiful before last season, winning like 4 games, 5 games, and then all of a sudden last year, coming out of nowhere. It's not that they came out of nowhere. People predicted them to do good, but to actually, live up to expectations is new for them. So we'll see if they can do that. I think they can. They've got a very strong defensive line, and just depth all around on the offensive skill possessions. That's the thing. They don't have just one key guy that everyone's going to have attention on. They've got depth. They've got multiple rushers that they can rotate in. Lots of good receivers for Hartman to throw the ball. So I like the makeup of this team. I think they're going to do pretty good. I don't think they're going to repeat as champs, though. I don't think they're going to finish first. I'm going to give that to Clemson. College football, I think, is going to, it's going to look a little bit more like we're used to seeing it with Clemson at the top. They obviously had a down year, just 6-2 in the conference, 10-3 overall. Their key game I've got is going to be at Wake Forest. Got to go on the road. Wake Forest desperately going to be wanting to win that game. But Clemson last year didn't start off to a great start. They ended the year well. And I think, people are kind of underestimating Clemson, but they're going to be a very, very good team. That the defense of Clemson is their strength, especially on the defensive line. All 4 of their starters are All-American candidates. It's one of their best D-lines since they won the national championship in 2018. A lot of talent there. And their skill players, I think, are going to be better than they were last year. That was the big problem. DJ Uliagagli. I can't say his name. DJ Uliagagli. God, that's so badly butchered. But he was good for him last year. Just their skill players weren't like, Clemson skill players of before. They've got better at the receiver, running back, tight end positions. It's a team that lost a lot of close games. And they just had a lot of close games in general. Like they could have been 1-6 or they could have been 7-0 last year. They played Georgia, the national champions, lost like 10-3. So they had some very close games against good teams, but then also too they weren't just blowing out the bad teams. So that's something Clemson has traditionally done. They've blown out the bad teams, but they did have a lot of end of the year momentum. Like I said, they beat some good teams, but as a result, things just happened where there was just major turnover in the staff department this year, losing both their coordinators, some other coaches as well. Just they had to replace a lot. We'll see how that looks early on in the season. Might take a little bit more time to gel with the offense and defense. Brent Venables leaving, I think it's a big deal. He was one of the best defensive coordinators in college, if not the best. and they were lucky to have him for as long as they did, in my opinion. But he finally got to take a job that he wanted to at Oklahoma with that opening. But DJ is obviously their quarterback, their key player, trying to live up to the expectations of the other Clemson quarterbacks recently, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. I don't think he's as talented as those guys, but he is still talented. People are kind of forgetting how he was when he was a freshman and went toe-to-toe with Notre Dame, scoring a lot of points in that game. They should have won that. That was a very exciting game as a freshman that he played in. Was good last year. The offensive line needs to be better for him, but Clemson's got the expectations for a national championship this year. They're going to be ranked in the top 5 probably to start the year. A very, very good team. And in my opinion, they're susceptible to upsets. I'm definitely going to say that. But at the same time, predicting these, conference finishes and stuff, they just have the most talent. I got to give the edge to them, and that's why I'm giving them first place. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. How'd you enjoy this video? And we've got the ACC Coastal Division coming up next week, so that'll be fun to record. And as always, guys, remember, be clutch.